what we did last week is we looked at the Agadata on Kofa Lane Har Kagigas. A mountain was placed over the Jewish people. And the question that existed was, if the Jews were basically forced to accept the Torah, then isn't there a problem with their acceptance from a contractual idea, because it was a contract under duress. So that seemed to be the question, and when we looked at the Gemara, we basically came up with five different understandings of our relationship with God as the Mitzvah, or as the giver of the Torah. The one that is perhaps the most commonly understood is the concept that comes from mitzvah and command, is the idea of governmental authority. God's king, and therefore he commands, and therefore your job is to do the law. So that's one concept, okay? And that's the way most people really look at it. You don't think in terms of having to accept. You think in terms of, that's the law, that's the rules. God says jump, and you ask how high. So that seems to be the one perspective, okay? And that perspective is really reflected in the lifting of the mountain over the Jewish people and saying, this is what I want you to do. The other perspective is this perspective contractual. The very fact that the Gemara questions how can we say we accepted the Torah, or there's a duress for this acceptance, therefore we don't have to even observe the Torah, it seems it's contractual. Contractual means that it had to be an acceptance, which means it has to come with a desire from the recipients. Okay, the Jewish people wanted to accept the Torah. Okay, so it's not a matter of command, it's a matter of, yeah, we want this. And this contract is a problem, because it seems to be that this contract was given under duress at the time of Sinai, and then it was reaffirmed at Purim without duress. So it seems to me that there was this need to have a faulty contractual relationship at Sinai, because the contract was under duress, but then that the contract was reestablished at Purim. The third perspective is the idea talks in terms of reality. Okay, the perception of it's built into reality that this is what you have to do, right? It's like you don't put your hand into a socket because you get an electric shock. Okay, that's the reality. So it seems to be that the other aspect of the Gemara is that it's built into creation and nature that the Jews have to observe the Torah. Actually, Jews have to accept the Torah, but basically the observance of Torah is something that is necessary from a realistic perspective. And the other possibility wasn't an aspect of contract itself. It was an aspect where that was the deal, and it doesn't matter whether it's a contract or not, that's the situation. And the example that's given there is the example that the Jews, to be in Eretz Yisrael, had to follow Torah. Whether they accepted it or not, that was the deal. So once they stopped following Torah, therefore they were exiled from the land. Okay, and that's the way many Rishonim answer how there could have been a punishment before Purim, because built into the question is if you say it was a contract under duress, then how could there be, and therefore it had to be rectified at Purim. So the question is, so how could there be a negative consequence for not following a contract? Because whether you accepted the contract or not, this was the situation. Situation is, you follow Torah, you get the land. Okay, but the fact is since you didn't follow Torah, you were exiled from the land. Okay, so that basically is what we saw last week, the different perspectives of our relationship with Torah and our relationship with God as the giver of Torah. The fact is when you look at Har Sinai itself, the classic statement of acceptance is Nasa v'nishma. Okay, now the truth is, as I mentioned to you, Tosfos asked the question, the point is that they say, why did they have a question of duress when they accepted the Torah? Then they already accepted by Nasa v'nishma. Okay, so, but the point is that there seemed to have been, and therefore Tosfos gives an answer why Nasa v'nishma had its weaknesses, or they thought they had the weaknesses, and so forth. But the fact is that Nasa v'nishma seems to be the classic statement of acceptance at Har Sinai. Now, and there seems to be somewhat. It's interesting we see Nasa v'nishma. The fact is that in terms of the chronology in the Chumash, okay, the statement where we learn Koifleim Harkagiyas, the Retachtis Hahar, is actually found much earlier than the statement of Nasa B'nishma. So it seems to be that the statement that they were put under duress to accept the Torah was before Nasa B'nishma, but Rashi points out over there and so forth that really the statement of Nasa B'nishma preceded the argument of the acceptance at under the mountain. The fact is, though, is that if you look at item number, just want to point out something from Rashi. If you look at item number 27, okay, you'll see over there that in terms of the Gemara's understanding of the second idea, in terms of creation, when it says that originally the Jews were upset, originally the world was upset. What happened? They were worried. The reference to the second part of the reference to the Gemara from last week, where it says that the earth was frightened and also tranquil. So it says over there that the fact that they were frightened. So item 27 says, "Betchila," when they were frightened, "Betchila," he says, "Kodem shamru Yisrael nasa v'nishma." Before the Jews said Nasa v'nishma, that's when they were frightened, and they became tranquil was when they said Nasa v'nishma. Now that's really from the Gemara last week, but it really points out that Nasa v'nishma is really the classic statement of acceptance. So what we're going to be looking at tonight is basically what is this classic statement of acceptance. And what I'm going to identify, I hope, is why Nasa v'nishma itself has an element of duress. Okay, because what I see in terms of this Gemara here and the Gemara previously is that there's really a sort of a symbiosis between being under the mountain and Nasa v'nishma, and there is and it actually reflects somewhat of an overall perspective. Okay, and that's where I want to go. And one of the key points about this is to understand that they didn't have to say Nasa v'nishma to accept. They could have said just Naasa, right? They could have said just Nasa. So the truth is if you look in item, let me just find this for Moshe, in item, let's have this better organized. In I can't believe I can't find it. Ramosha basically points out, here it is, in item number 20, basically if you look at the first line in his comment on item number 20, he says, Hinai mala nasa lo garua mi nasa v'nishma. It would seem that just saying nasa can't be worse than nasa v'nishma. Okay, v'efshar fili yoser adif. Even more so. Ki rosim lasos below shmi klal. They just wanted to do. So the fact is they had the option to actually just say Nasa. Now, if you actually, the reason I want to look at this Ramosha is if you look at him quote the Psukim, Nasa v'nishma is in Perek Chavdalad Pasuk Zayin. Okay? In Perek Chavdalad Pasuk Gimel, okay, it says, V'yom Moshe yishaper lehem lekol divrei Hashem ve'kol ha'mishpatim v'yan kol ha'am kol echad v'yomru kol ha'dvarim asher diber Hashem Nasa. So the fact is they also did say Nasa. The point is they also said Nasa v'nishma. And maybe Ramosh is opening up the idea, well, Nasa would seem to be just as good. We're accepting it. Okay? Now the point is what's the point of Nasa v'nishma? And that's really the lead-in to this Gemara in Shabbos that we're going to be looking at tonight, which is item number 17. Because if you look at just turn this off. If you look at this statement, okay, we have to look at what really is so special about Nasa v'nishma. Okay, and okay, let's just look at this Gemara. Dara Shari Simai. Simai learns. B'shah shiktimu Yisrael nasa l'nishma, bo shishin ribui shavalochi hashard l'kol echad ve'echad mi'Yisrael. Okay? 600,000 angels came to the Jewish people, and kashulo shnei ketarim echad keneged nasa ve'echad keneged nishma. Gave them 2 crowns each, one for nasa and one for nishma. Okay? Kevin shachatu Yisrael yardu mea be'esrim ribui malachi hachavala upirkum. Okay, and then afterwards, when they did the Chet Egel, okay, 1,200,000 came down and took away the crowns. Okay, they took away the special jewel ornaments. The translation is from Har Chorev. Amra Chama Rechanina. Okay, Bechor of Tanu, Bechor of Parku. Okay, it's talking about ornaments that they received on Sinai, which is Chorev. Okay, so the point is that they were given 2 crowns, one for Nasa and one for Nishma. Now that becomes significant, okay? Because when you think of Nasa and Nishma, okay, the way most people present it is that the greatness of Nasa and Nishma is that they said Nasa before Nishma, right? That's it. Because they could have said Nishma, but normal people would say Nishma before what's in it, and then I'll do it. So they say Nasa before Nishma. So Ramosha basically, we saw already, basically says, so why didn't they just say Nasa? They didn't have to say Nasa and Nishma, they could have just said Nasa. Now there's something else that comes out from this Gemara already. They received 2 crowns, one for Nasa and one for Nishma. The implication is that Nishma had value. Now, the point being that the reason and the fact is that there's 2 aspects here. One is the value in Nasa and Nishma, placing Nasa before Nishma. That already is special, and that means that it's better than Nasa alone. And the second thing is the fact that you have Nasa and Nishma both having value. Okay? So that becomes a very significant idea.
Well, some people say that Nasa is the Vishpokase and Nishma is the Vishpolo Testament.
I've never heard that. I mean, we'll see. What?
I didn't make it up.
No, okay. I've never heard that before. I'm sorry. But, I mean, it doesn't... We'll see from the sources. It doesn't fit anything anyone's going to say here. No. Okay. Now, the point is so we already see 2 points here. One is that there's a value in Nasa and Nishma, and then there's a value in placing Nasa and Nishma, and that actually has a value into itself. Now, the truth is, there's also the idea that you had one angel bring the 2 crowns in giving it, and you have 2 angels in taking it away. So the truth is that, and this is in item number 19, where the Maral points this out, is the fact that Nasa v'Nishma becomes an organic whole. It's not just simply these 2 ideas. It's the fact that Nasa v'Nishma is actually one idea. And that's why when it was brought, okay, the angels brought 2 crowns, but it was only one angel who brought those crowns. When they took it away, it was 2 angels, because the organic compound of Nasa v'Nishma, you know, like what do you call it? It's not just a mixture. It's like a compound. It's like a new element. It's like an entity together. Water is different than just hydrogen and oxygen. So Nasa v'Nishma is that idea of being one aspect of something. He says that happens and was given. This is what the Maral says in item number 19. And then when they did the Chet Ha'egel, it was broken down. Okay, so what we're seeing here is that Nasa v'Nishma has an organic whole. It's more significant than Nasa, okay, and somehow Nishma is an important element within it. Okay, that's the way I understand this. And the fact is then we're going to jump ahead a little bit into Mrs. Gemara. Okay? Okay, it says over there in the second last of the intermediary letters, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Okay? B'shah shektimu Yisrael nasa l'nishma yatsa baskol v'amra lahan mi gila l'vnai razeh shemalachi asharish. Who revealed this great secret from the ministering angels? Okay? To Bnei Israel. Okay, the Mishamshavot, the Malachi Asharis use. Okay? And the fact is that Nasa v'Nishma was a real special idea. It was the ministering angels. And the fact is that they're trying to point out that this is really a significant idea. Okay? Okay, so we have to try and understand what's significant about Nasa v'Nishma. Okay? And what I'm going to lead to, I think, will also explain how Nasa v'Nishma creates a certain tension. Okay. Okay, so what is Nasa v'Nishma? What do you think Nasa v'Nishma means? What's Nishma? We will do and we will understand. What does that mean? Try to figure it out. What is Nishma? When you say we will do and we will do and we will hear, what's generally understood about Nishma?
Obey, I think, is what I usually see.
Obey?
We will.
So the fact is, yeah? Comprehend? It's a little bit different. I mean, and the fact is that if Nishma just means hearing or whatever, that always has to precede doing. I have to hear what you want me to do before I do it. Right? So the point is it can't be hearing. If it's just obey, that's already built into Nasa. Right? I'm going to do. Okay, so it's comprehending. Comprehending what?
Why we're doing what we're supposed to do.
So you're saying it's the reason of the mitzvah. The reason for the mitzvah. Okay.
Jonathan Sachs has 12 meanings of...
What?
Rabbi Sachs has 12 meanings of Shema in his Siddur.
Okay. Okay.
Shema.
Does that just mean Hear, O Israel?
Right.
Okay. Any other ideas? Okay, so the truth is, one is understanding so forth. I mean, as people talk about Nasa v'Nishma, and Nishma being learning, right? Which we'll see, we're going to look at that in a second, but the fact is, I want you to look at Rashi. Rashi's statement is very interesting. Okay, that's item 18. Okay? I'll say Dvar Lishmo. Uchadim lasos kodem sheyishmo. They're ready to do it before they will hear it. Lo kederach shar avadim, not like other slaves, sheshomen tefila et hadavar, who want to hear what they're what's being commanded. Leida im yimcholan lekablan aleim ilav, where they know whether they can do it or not do it. So what's Nishma according to Rashi? According to Rashi, it seems to be
kind of evaluation.
Evaluation of
ability.
Right? In other words, God says, okay, I want you to run a marathon. I'm going to run a marathon. Right? Normal people say, wait a second. What exactly do you want me to do? I can't run a marathon. So the way Rashi seems to be saying is that there's an idea here where they said, we're going to do before even evaluating if we can do it. But it seems pragmatic. It's an evaluation of the self's ability to do it. Okay? Now it's different than the understanding that you presented beforehand. That's not giving the reason for the mitzvah. That's trying to figure out the connection between the individual and the mitzvah. So that's Rashi's understanding. Okay? So that's one approach. Okay.
It's also interesting, Rashi uses the term shar avadim.
Right.
The analogy is that it's really comes back to the original idea of commanded, and the servant jumps as high as he's supposed to jump.
Right.
So.
But even the servant says, listen, my master, I can't do that. Okay, but the fact is there's this aspect of master there being also. Okay, but he's implying in this master relationship that there's at least some type of flexibility that can I do it or not. But he's saying that's normally the idea of Shar Vadim. Okay, Ramosha takes another approach. Okay? Now, a lot of people refer to Nasav and Nishma, as we will do and we will learn. And Nishma is accepted for the Limud Torah. Okay? So watch Ramosha's statement, how he understands this. Okay? So he says,
which number is
that's number 20. Okay? Now, you have to understand, Ramosha is very big on this. Okay? Okay, the fact is that okay, Ramosha is very big on this in terms of how you figure out what the halacha is. So if you look at, we look this, if we look at the fourth line down, okay? Ela HaTorah nitna pam achas la'olam. Torah is only given one time in history. Okay? Olam va'ed, forever. Afterwards, God said, can't ask me anymore. Okay? Therefore, it's given over to the wise of the generation to figure out, everyone for self, what has to be done. Kosher, not kosher. This is what it's all about, and you can't ask God anymore. Even if the Navi comes down and says, here's the answer, can't listen to a Navi. Right? And therefore we have the case that even though you have disagreements among the Rishonim, scholars, they both have equal value. Right? Okay. Why? Because they're both trying to figure out what the Torah means. And we can't ask God anymore. So therefore, we have to figure it out. But you got to know, if a person just tries to figure out the Torah on his own, doesn't have a Masorah, doesn't have learning, right? He won't really have the truth. Now the fact is, that is a very fundamental idea, the difference between Rabbinic Judaism and Karaite Judaism. Karaite Judaism had tremendous amount of commentaries. Karaite Judaism was analyzing the Chumash all the time. But it was very much autonomous in the hands of the individual. There was no right or wrong. It was like, here's the book, go figure it out. And therefore, you could say almost anything as long as it fit into the words of the book. Okay? That's really what happened in Karaite thought. And the limitation was the words of the book. They got really angry at Chazal, or the Saddukis got really angry at Chazal, because they would go beyond the parameters of the written word. Because within Rabbinic Judaism, you apply the Masorah as the basic parameters. Therefore, if you really want to understand what the Torah is saying, you have to learn. You have to have the parameters of Limud Torah. Okay, so therefore he's saying that he has the person of the Torah limit. Okay, Hariyeshal Misfurish. Okay, Ein Lefarz Torah. Okay, because okay. Okay, if he only learns it, okay, and he doesn't have the Torah, you won't have the Torah statements. We have Masorah, Eich Lefarsh Torah, but Kain Harbe Min Halachos. We have Masorah about how to learn Torah. Okay? Okay, but Kol Elu Hadvarim Yeshon B'Kabbalat Ad Moshe Rabbeinu Shehu Kibo MeHaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is what we have to work with. L'chein ha'ikar hu she'adam yilmod v'yavin ha'Torah midato. Therefore, the essence is that human beings have to learn the Torah, use their heads, think it through. Avofi sheshama mipi rabosav dahainu l'fi ha'kapala shehem nisnalo. Okay, it has to go according to their Masorah, according to Kabbalah. Now, if you ever read the Hakdama of Moshe to Zigras Moshe, it's a very powerful statement about what he calls emes l'hara, the truth for halachic determination. And what he says is that what the Torah wanted you to do is figure it out on your own. And if you figure it on your own with all your efforts and your Havana and so forth, that's what you have to do. That's what God calls upon you to do it. He says specifically, it's not even emes l'kabel shrine. It's not necessarily, may not actually be the real truth in heaven. But the fact is, if you figured this out, this is the halacha that you figured out through all your analysis, which includes total knowledge of the information, or reasonable knowledge of the information, then that's your decision. And that's what you should do. And the fact is therefore he makes Limud Torah actually part and parcel of figuring out what Nasa is. That's what he's really doing over here. V'zehu Nasa v'nishma. And that's what Moshe says is Nasa v'nishma. Okay? Anachnu Nasa hadvarim unilmod otam al derech she'arinu Rabbeinu. We'll do and we'll figure it out pursuant to the system that we have of the Masorah. Okay? V'zehu hashevach hagadol she'nasa v'nishma. And this is the great praise of Nasa v'nishma. What Ramosh is really doing over here is presenting an interesting, a fundamental concept in our understanding of the relationship with us to Torah and with us to God. It's an interesting relationship. Okay? The fact is I asked you, so God says jump. You ask how high. Okay? But how do you know God said jump? Well, you got to figure it out whether God really meant jump or whether he meant sit. So the fact is that within Jewish thought, there's actually an idea that you're involved in determining what God wants you to do. It's in a certain way the anti-fundamentalist concept. Okay, we're really in many ways, Orthodox thought is very anti-fundamentalist, because the fact is the only way you can understand what God wants you to do is if you question, analyze, use the Masorah, and use your head. Use your mind. Because you have to figure it out what God wants you to do. So in a certain ways, Ramosh is saying, if you just said Nasa, good, Nasa. But like what? What Nasa? Well, the way God gave over the Torah. In fact, in his Akdama Tigris Moshe, it's very interesting. Moshe points out, said, why didn't God just give it nice and clearly? Why didn't God just give it straightforward? Don't do this, and so forth and so forth. Why does everything have to be an analysis? Couldn't God have written the Torah in such a way that you don't have disagreements, you don't have issues, you don't have it all and so forth, you don't have machlokesim, you don't have everyone having this? He says, because that's not what God wanted to do. God clearly, in fact, he actually develops it in a very interesting way in the Hadama. There's a famous medrash that says that when Moshe went up to Shemayim, he saw God writing the tagim on the letters, right? The little squiggies on certain letters, the shin and so forth and so forth. It's a famous medrash that he was writing the little tagim on the medrash. So Moshe says, "What's that for you?" So Kosh Baruch Hu says, in the future, there'll be a great rabbi, Rabbi Akiva, who will darshan thousands and thousands of halachas from these tagim, from these little points on the letters. Okay? So Ramosha points out that we don't have a case of Rabbi Akiva ever darshaning tagim. It's not found. So what's really going on over here? So basically what he says is, Rabbi Akiva is saying, why don't you just make it clear? Right? Instead of saying creates hadar, a tree, a fruit of a beautiful tree, say esrog. Right? That's one word, 3 words. I mean, why did you just write it clearly? We wouldn't have any more arguments. It'll be nice and forward. Everyone. And what Kosh Baruch Hu said is basically, that wasn't my intention. I didn't want to do that. I wanted people to work it out. Okay? So the fact is that this is consistent with Ramosha's idea that he's saying in Nasa v'nishma, you can't just do, you have to think. So we've seen 2 concepts here. One is ability. Second one is they had to say Nasa v'nishma to figure it out. Okay.
Wouldn't it have made, according to Moshe's interpretation, to reverse the order then? It's a process of working, figuring it out, and Right. So the fact is that the commitment had to come first, that I am going to be committed to follow the system, or I consider the value in doing it, okay, and then I understand that I have to figure out what it is I'm doing. I understand your question, but I think that he's dealing with it as a fact that there was first the commitment, I'm going to do it. Now I understand that I have to figure out what I'm going to do. Okay, you can ask the same question with ability. Isn't there value in
figure out why you can do it as well. I mean, the fact is that, and I'm hypothesizing. I understand your question. I think the value is in the organic whole. That basically, saying nishma for nasa is reasonable, makes sense. It's the nasa, the nishma, and switching it that opens up this new perception of what's happening. So of course you have to figure it out what to do. But here it's saying that there's a commitment to do, and then while you're figuring it out, okay, and it changes the perspective of figuring it out to be subsequent to the commitment. I mean, I could hypothesize, you know,
simply, if there's no commitment, it's much easier to give up on trying to figure out.
That's true too. That's true also.
Who would bother?
Yes.
I would go like this. You see, in many ways, one of the issues that exist in our relationship amongst ourselves as observant Jews is what binds us. Is what binds us the system, or is what binds us the actions? Right? In a certain way, there are people who do actions that we disagree with. But since they both arrive from the same system, we are to treat them as fellows. Right? And therefore we are to treat them as halachic colleagues. Even though if you look at their actions may be very different than ours. In the same way, there are people we may share their actions with, but they don't share the system. I'm trying to think of an example of this without you know, in a nice parv example of this. You know, someone asked me recently the difference between our world and the world in the 1800s or whatever. So if you look in, I forget her first name, Mrs. Meiselman's book about the Soloveitchik family. Okay, Moshe Meiselman's mother wrote a book on the Soloveitchik legacy, and she spoke about her parents. Right, her parents were Moshe Soloveitchik and his wife. I can't believe I can't remember his wife. The Rebbe, right? But the fact is that who was the father of Rav Yoshe Ber, the father of, you know, the parents of Rav Aaron. The fact is she writes a story. Now, she talks about the shidduch, and someone approached Rav Chaim about the shidduch, and people think like, "Oh, are you crazy to suggest this shidduch?" Okay, because it was Moshe Soloveitchik, the son of Rav Chaim, and his wife. I mean, the eventual wife was the daughter of Rav Feinstein. Rav Feinstein was one of the most adamant proponents of having secular studies in Volozhin. Rav Chaim was against secular studies, extremely adamant against secular studies, and Rav Feinstein, and the Aruch HaShulchan, by the way, also, but Rav Feinstein was very adamant pro-secular studies. So they came to Rav Chaim. Can you imagine this? You know, going up to a real Haredi rabbi to have a shidduch for you. You know, someone from the modern Orthodox world. I mean, how far would that go? Came to Rav Chaim. Rav Chaim says, "Beautiful. Yeah, I'm asking to it." And supposedly the story goes, Rav Chaim sat down with Rav Moshe and said, "Listen, you know, they got engaged and so forth. He was going to live for a few years by his in-laws, who also was wealthy and was going to allow him to learn and so forth." So he said, and he says, "I just want you to know their Shabbos table is a little different than our Shabbos table." And Rav Moshe had some problems with this, and the fact is that I think you know, the Rav says that he learned all about Tolstoy or Chekhov from his mother. I mean, totally different worlds. But Rav Chaim had no problem. He's from. He disagrees with me, but he's from. It's a different perception. And Ramosh is very adamant about this in terms of Elu Velu. The fact is if you're committed to the system, so that changes the aspect, I think. That in certain ways, you're committed to do, and in certain ways it may be strengthening your question because you have to figure out Nishma before Nasa, but it's a commitment to do, and then you figure it out. But it's under that commitment to do, which makes you somehow, in the organic whole, see the things a little bit differently. I'm not sure if I've answered the question, but okay. Let's look at the Rav. So the Rav, Shaber says another answer, and I leave it to you to read his whole perspective. But basically, he makes a difference between Ratzon Elyon and Ratzon Tachton. Basically, Ratzon Elyon is the essential soul saying, I want to know what's right and what's wrong. I want to do what's right. That's a Ratzon Elyon. And then the Ratzon Tachton is a result of your intellect. And he says, really, the Ratzon Elyon, he says it's an intuitive sense, okay, of what is valid, imperative, and so forth. He says, when people want to make the right decision, it's really the Ratzon Elyon, right? Who you marry, you don't do an intellectual analysis, The fact is that it's sort of like this idea of an intuitive sense of something coming from your very being. So the way he seems to understand Nasa v'Nishma is that Nasa came from the Ratzon Elyon. Of course, I'm going to do it, right? I want to be close to God. I want to have this connection to God, and so forth. And then the Ratzon Tachton is Nishma, and that's using your head and analyzing and so forth. But that's secondary. That's a Rav's viewpoint. Now, I want to point out one thing about this. If you go to item number 23, okay, Ratzon Elyon, Ratzon Tachton. The fact is if Yosheber presents his value of the Ratzon Elyon in another discussion about Esther, he says that women are superior to men in two ways. He says applied practical action and prayer. He says applied practical action. He gives a classic example. He says Esther, right? Mordechai says go. Esther was a politician. He says no, this is not the way we're going to do this. This is the plan. If you in Purim, all of a sudden Esther takes over. So he says, you see, this is women. They're practical. They're Ramosha basically. The Rav basically says they got the practical application of how to be a good politician in terms of figuring out how to do it. Says the other side of women though is prayer. Who's the mother of prayer? It's Hannah, right? And prayer is something that comes from this intuitive aspect, okay, in terms of understanding of God and so forth. So that's the way he understands this aspect of prayer. It's like this, I want to say, leap of faith. And by the way, in the Ratzon Elyon argument, he says it's like a leap of faith and so forth. Now, I remember once speaking to Rav Yaakov Weinberg, Rav Shiva in Baltimore, and asking his take on the Rav. These are very interesting ideas about the Rav. Okay, even though he really held it. He was something. Anyways, so basically, I'm not going to say that this is actually what Rav Yaakov's exact language, but this is what he came across in item number 24. How can one say that tefillah is not practical? It is the most practical thing to do. If you have a problem and you know that someone can help you and solve the problem, would you not ask for assistance? How much more so when the one who can help is God? Now the truth is, if you think about that, isn't that being practical? So now let's look at the questions of practicality and ability. Let's go through the Nasa aspect over there before. Practical. God says to do something. So we said we'll do, and we didn't ask whether we could do it. Would God ask you something to do that you can't do? Isn't there a concept that God only asks you things that you can do? Isn't there a concept that God is a tova, meitiv, and He's only telling you things that are good for you? So Rav Yaakov is saying basically, it makes sense to pray if God can help you out. So wouldn't it make sense practically to say, I'm going to do, simply because God won't ask me to do something that doesn't make any sense? He's only asking me to do something that's worthwhile. Now, the fact is that idea becomes very significant in this next Gemara. Okay, and this is item number 25. It says over here that a Saduki, okay, saw Rabbi. Rabbi was learning.
What is translating, because we have trouble with the Aramaic on this side over here.
Okay,
Translating into Hebrew is fine.
No, that's fine. I mean, I can read the English also. I mean, I'm not. I'm not trying to say I shouldn't translate. I was just. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm just rushing through. That's all. But okay, I'll translate. Hasu Saduki the Chazil Rabba. Okay, the Saduki saw Rabba the Kabbalat that he was learning. Okay, he was really involved. The Yasai Abbasva Didei Tute Kara, and he put his fingers under his feet, or somehow I guess basically he was sitting, and mostly he put him under his body. Okay, and what happened was b'kamayitzbo. Okay, and he was crushing them. Okay, so basically he was rubbing his fingers, who he put out of his way, and he was rushing them against the ground because of the way he was sitting. Okay, v'kamavayin etzbasei dama, and blood was coming out of his fingers. Okay, Amarle. Okay, so the Saduki says to Rabba, Amma Pazaye, you guys are really what do you call it? Rash. Okay, the kadmisri pumache adachaychi. You sort of said you'd listen before, okay, before you knew what you're getting into. Okay, you should have figured it out beforehand. Okay, to see if you're able to do it. If you're able to do it, then it's a good thing to do. If you're not able to do it, you shouldn't have done it, right? So he says, listen, you're rash. You're basically acting very emotional and rational by rubbing you're hurting yourself by doing it. He says your own nation is rash because you should have figured out what it was that God was asking you to do before you're doing, which is really Rashi's idea, right? Okay. So what is it? What did he say? Okay, Anan. The Saginin Beshlemuma. Okay? See Ben Thomas Yisharim Tanachim. Hanech Inshe the Sagan Be'elule, see Behu V'Salach Bogdim Yishnam. Okay. So he says, we who are involved in uprightness, we're saying that we have integrity. You who basically are totally perverse, it says over there that you'll die in your treachery. What he's really saying is this, is what Rashi says. So again, if you look at Rashi, he'd halachnu imo betum lev kederech ha'osim mi'avo. Right? We who accepted the Torah with God are people of faith, who did it out of love. The samchinu alav, and we relied upon shalayitanu bedaber shalnucholamabo, that God wouldn't ask something else that we weren't able to do, which is a practical argument. So the Saduki is arguing, you guys are in practice. What are you talking about? We trust God. He's not going to ask us to do something that's impractical. Right? He's a Tova Native, so we trust him. So that comes out practical. It really supports Rav Yaakov Weinberg's argument beforehand. Right? So the fact is that in a certain way, you have this tension. Back to Rashi's idea. Rashi seems to imply that there's some great secret here, that we said yes before we were going to do it. Before we checked it out. And this is like a big secret because normally people want to check it out before they say yes. And the answer really is because Kodesh Baruch Hu asking us, we didn't have to check it out because we know he's only going to do something good. So then it becomes practical. So what's the big secret? Right? Okay. So I have an idea here. And it's somewhat connected to what we saw with Purim. fact is what you've seen is in terms of ability. Okay? There's an aspect of ability. But you also raised the question in terms of reason. We've also seen for Moshe there's an idea in terms of thinking and so forth. There's actually a distinction between someone who figures something out first, or someone who relies upon someone else's decision. Okay? Like in our world.
Sometimes you don't have that choice.
Yes, sometimes you don't have that choice. Right? You go to a doctor, you can't check it out.
Well, or even in an office environment. Your boss tells you to do something, you do
That's
it.
right. That's the boss. Tells you to do something.
Yeah.
But in general, what is a greater value? That you're able to figure it out on your own and understand why you're doing it, or whether you're doing it because you're relying upon someone else who you can trust to tell you it's a good thing to do? What's the better value? What do you think is the better objective in a person?
There's huge machloket about it, right?
In what way? The fact is, that's true in terms of how you do it, but in the end, you do it because you're mitzuvosa. You do it because you're mitzuvosa, but still, aren't you supposed to try figuring it out? Right? Okay, aren't you supposed to try figuring it out? The fact is that if you look at Rashi's statement, what does Rashi say? He says he put Nasa before Nishma. So let me ask you something. If you already agreed to doing it, what's the value of figuring out that you could do it? Rashi's statement is Nishma means you figure out the ability to do it. So then you've already agreed to do it. So why are you then, after you agreed to do it, now trying to figure it out that you're able to do it? Nasa, I'm doing it. Why? Because I trusted Him. God didn't tell me I'm going to do it. That's it. After I've already agreed to do it, and I'm doing it, right, now I want to figure out that I have the ability to do it. Why are you doing that for? What value is in that? So if you look at the undercurrent, even the Rav says Ratzon Tachton is the mind. Where Moshe talks about thinking through things. You have to know the halacha in terms of thinking it through. Fact is that even though you may listen to your boss because it's his environment, the truth of the matter is that our environment is not the office environment. Our environment is the environment HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants in terms of developing us. And the fact is that just in doing, that's not the process. The process is accepting what you're going to do because there's aspects of trusting in God, and that's really the dilemma that we're going to see further about. The fact is Rabbi says we trusted in God to tell us what to do. Suzuki says, why are you trusting Him? Well, who's the idiot here? If God's really going to tell you what's good for you, then you're an idiot for not trusting Him. If a person says, here's how you some guy comes up to you and says, I want you to invest in the market, invest in this stock. Okay, and this guy has all the knowledge. He says, this stock is going to go up. So I haven't figured it out on my own, so I'm not going to invest. So who's the idiot? The one who invests or doesn't invest? The guy who trusts is smart. The other guy is an idiot. So the truth is that there's a tension here. If Rabbi is right, and that's why he ends up saying that the people who don't listen are perverse and they're going to be destroyed, is that if Rabbi is right, then you're stupid not to listen to God. On the other hand, is the Suzuki saying you're stupid for listening to God? So he's basically implying that even if God is right, you shouldn't be doing this. Why? Because you should figure it out on your own. Right? There's a value in having that knowledge. There's a value in knowing I am able to do it. There's a value in knowing the reasons. Right? If you look in terms of Tamei Dekra, the Rambam is very big on that. Okay, you should try and figure out reasons for it. Right? Ramosha is saying there's inherent value in terms of Limud HaTorah. You can't even figure out what to do until you figure it out. The fact is the human being's analysis is necessary. The point is, though, is that it has to come subsequent to the acceptance. In a certain way, And this goes back to the Gemara last week in terms of Purim. The fact is what I think is happening here is that the acceptance at Har Sinai, Jews knew that they had to accept, but they also knew that they really didn't have the basis to accept, except relying upon God. Right? Hey, listen, we're going to rely upon God. He's telling us it's good, but I have no knowledge that it's good. I know that God's going to get whatever God tells me to do, I'm going to do, but I personally don't have that conclusion that I can accept. That in a certain way is a type of duress. Right? I don't have that self-knowledge. Later on, what happens is at Purim they developed a certain level of self-knowledge that they were able to say, yes, I want it. That I know I want it. Okay? So that's the theme here. So I understand now, so Nishma is the acceptance that was possible at that time. I know that I have to do this. It's the smart thing to do because I should rely upon God. Okay? It clearly is something I should do. But I understand that I really can't make that decision on my own right now. But I have to, but I'm also committed to figuring out that decision. That I think is Nasa V'Nishma. On all those levels. The ability, the reason, the Tamei Mitzvah, and so forth. And that doesn't mean that we've concluded it. We're all still in the process of Nasa V'Nishma. There was something that happened at Purim that they were able to accept. The fact is we're still in that process. Because there's still that process where we have to rely upon God, and we also have to do the Nasa and rely upon God and so forth and so forth. But the whole, and this I think is tied to Moshe's concept in terms of leaving the Torah, the fact is that part and parcel of our Torah experience is the fact that we have to try and understand it. Because that's necessary for us. Okay? And we're going to go further into that when we look at the next Midrashim and why the non-Jews couldn't say that. Okay? Okay.